Mr. Gambrelli, I'm going to pose a question to you, and I also intend to pose it to National Programming Service that delivers out-of-market signals as well. I understand that you have about 800,000 subscribers to your out-of-market signal service.
That's correct, Mr. Chairman.
And I wonder if you know, and if you don't know this morning, if you can do the research and inform us of the number of subscribers among that 800,000 who reside in places where there is currently local interlocal service. There are two grandfather provisions in the law that, under two different sets of circumstances, allow the residents of markets that have local interlocal service to continue to receive distant signals or to opt to receive them instead. And I wonder if you know how many people living in those local interlocal markets are receiving distant signals, or if you could find that out for us.
I don't know offhand, but there's a question. There's the grandfathered customers who had distant signals before we carry locals and who opt to keep them. But there's also those customers in markets like Lafayette who receive the one local station and receive the other networks via distant network. I mean, they're part of the 800,000. So I'll try to break out those that receive networks where they're fully covered by locals but choose to receive distance.
Well, yeah, we call that latter situation short markets, where there's really only, where not all of the networks have local affiliates within that market, and that's a kind of a special case. But carve that out also. Give us those numbers if you can. And we're very interested in knowing the numbers of subscribers you have for out-of-market signals in areas where there is full local interlocal service with all networks represented in that market. So if you could send that to us, that would be very
certainly
helpful.
Can get that for you, sir.
All right. Thank you very much. Mr. Yeager, you have recommended that the Section 119 license be eliminated coincident with the statutory requirement that local interlocal service be provided in all of the 210 local television markets. If that were to be adopted, what would you do in the situation where, as Mr. Gabrielli has just described, there are markets where not every network is represented by a local affiliate in that market, so-called short markets? Would you permit the importation of a distant signal into those markets for the network that does not have a local affiliate in that market?
Well, I'm unaware of all of these markets that supposedly don't have full network service.
Well, there are a number of them.
But in regard to that, let me say that I think we have to come up with a local service. We have to maintain local.
Well, I understand that, Mr. Yeager, but my time is limited, and the question is, today we don't have it everywhere, and even if you mandate it, you're still going to have markets where not all networks are represented with local affiliates. What do you do in a situation like that?
Well, we have significantly viewed status right now for many of those.
Okay, well, that doesn't cover it all either. Okay, well, why don't you perhaps submit to us an answer in writing?
All right, fine.
And we'd be happy to hear from you on that. Mr. Ergen, Mr. Gabrielli, I have a question for both of you. And it goes to the heart of what much of our debate in this committee on reauthorizing the law is going to be about. It's been 10 years now since the local interlocal license was first granted. And in that 10-year period, much has changed. Most of the country now has the benefit of local interlocal service, but there are 30 markets that still do not, and I actually represent one of those markets, or at least part of it. Spot beams were not commonly in use at the time this license was created 10 years ago. Today, spot beams are. That makes for far more efficient use of your spectrum. And in the meantime, another major thing that's changed is that you're now adding high-definition service, which consumes quite a bit of spectrum in the more populated markets. But we still have 30 markets around the country where there is no local interlocal service. And in these markets, oftentimes, you have a very small number of television stations. Maybe it's all of the networks represented, nothing else. Maybe you don't even have that many. Maybe not all the networks are represented with local affiliates. And these are oftentimes geographically challenging areas where people really need the satellite service because they can't get service delivered over the air because of being a long way from the television station or because of terrain. And so, you know, the arguments from people in these 30 markets are very vocal that if you're going to get the benefit of a nationally granted license that lets you offer the local service, in return for getting that license, you should be required to offer that service everywhere. And the technology now has improved to the point that it's somewhat easier for you to do that. So that's the complaint we're hearing. And I want to give you an opportunity, both of you, to respond to that. And my time is expiring, so as soon as you conclude your answer, I'll turn to Mr. Stearns. But Mr. Ergen, would you like to respond, and then Mr. Gabrielli?
Sure, and it's a great question. You know, first of all, our company delivers in 178 DMAs, so there's only 32 DMAs that we don't deliver a signal in. I was a little bit shocked that Mr. Yeager was unaware. And all those markets, those are short markets, Mr. Chairman. So, and our company, as you may know, after a long court battle, is not allowed to bring in a non-broadcast network in those short markets. So we have, not only do we have technical issues that we perhaps could overcome with enough time and money, but we have real economic issues that without bringing in a short market station, without the ability to do so, there's no customer would buy it from us anyway. So, and it's a shame that the representative from the National Association of Broadcasters doesn't realize that we have this issue of short markets without all network stations in all markets. We certainly believe that it shouldn't be mandated from a legislative point of view. What I'd like to see this committee do is bring the economic incentives so that we could generate competition and that we would have the desire from an economic point of view to go out and do all 210 markets. And again, our company is certainly prepared to meet the challenges to do those kinds of things with the ability to actually bring in short market signals. And you have to balance that somewhat with the must-carry laws as well, which is why we suggested that where there's not local content, you free that bandwidth up for those local markets. If you do those things, I think you have a good shot at getting most, if not all, by one or both of the DBS providers.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Ergen. Mr. Gabrielli.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I would like to make the point, though, that both Dish Network and us, we're secondary transmitters of a primary broadcast. So we're really doing what the television stations are supposed to do, which is cover their market. We happen to have some advantages of doing it, but it's not our primary business. The covering the 210 markets, as Mr. Ergen has said, has got a number of technical difficulties. One is, and we've picked up some stations like in Zanesville and in Lafayette where it's a single station, but getting the other networks is tough because we have to get agreements from all the locals around it that bleed into it and all have some right to claim that those are their customers and that we can't bring somebody else in. So we have to negotiate with everybody in the surrounding territory. A technical issue is that local station often is in a pretty remote place, and we have a very tough time of getting the signal back to us. That we have to get those signals via fiber in ground, and quite often there's no fiber to these stations, and that is a huge economic burden to take that we have to go to try to get those signals.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Stearns.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I remember when Chevera, when we had this act in 2004 and we marked it up, and I thought it was rather simple we could do, but it became very complicated. And after hearing a little bit of your opening statements, I can see that this will perhaps be complicated again. But the difference is, as I mentioned in my opening statement, is we now have, not only satellite and cable, but we have broadcasters, and we have the phone companies, Sprint and AT&T coming involved. We have the Internet. We have the iPhone. We have so much more. So is it possible some of the arguments we made back when Billy Tozin was chairman of this committee in the Republican majority, some of the arguments we made about letting the market decide, maybe even more so today? And so this is to follow up a little bit on what Chairman Boucher has talked about in dealing with this must-carry requirements. When it was brought up, the argument was ultimately it was constitutional and must-carry had to be provided because there was insufficient competition to ensure broadcast stations would gain carriage on the marketplace. So this question is sort of fundamental to our whole debate this morning, and this is for Mr. Ergen, Gabrielli, and Faree. in light of what I mentioned with the satellites and broadcasting and the phone companies, the internet, and all these various new markets, and the multiple outlets for carriage, does the constitutional argument still apply? Is it still that we must carry requirements have to be implemented because of law? I'll start with Mr. Ferry first.
In my judgment, it would be unconstitutional without a doubt. I don't think you have to be Oliver Wendell Holmes to figure this one out. The original must-carry rule was held up by a 5-4 majority in the Supreme Court based on an extensive record showing that broadcast stations, some broadcast stations would fail without carriage on their local cable systems. I don't think you could, I mean, first of all, we don't have that record for satellite services, and I don't think you could create such a record. So I think without a doubt it would be struck down as unconstitutional.
Okay, and then we'll go to Mr. Cabrilli.
I guess if the answer would be we'd rather not have a must carry. I mean, the capacity we use to carry a number of stations that don't have any local content, we would love to use that capacity to carry local stations in, again, these smaller, markets that we can't currently carry right now.
Okay, Mr. Ergen.
Yeah, I don't know about the constitutionality, but again, I think I'm sympathetic to a local broadcaster who invests in his community and invest in his local content, that when possible we should carry them, and we do that today. I think where I think we've got it, where I think this committee has it wrong, is where you mandate must carry when a broadcaster doesn't invest in his community and he gets the benefit without the investment. I'll give you a simple example. We carry home shopping channels. And if we carry a national home shopping channel, we may carry it 20 different times in 20 different spot beams, and it's exactly the same signal, minute by minute, second by second, and there's not one local commercial, and there's not one local newscast, right?
But the argument's made that you should...
We shouldn't have to, in my opinion, if the broadcaster doesn't invest in his local community with local content, news, weather, sports, political, so forth and so on, there shouldn't be a requirement for cable or satellite or phone companies that we have to carry their signal, because we uniquely can carry it on a national basis and get the customer the same signal. It happens sometimes with the religious broadcast, shopping, some international channels and so forth.
But you could argue then the religious broadcaster has to have local participation in his community before it will meet your criteria.
For example, we may carry a national religious channel. We may give it to all 110 million homes every square inch of the United States, but to duplicate that same signal on a local basis, as the law requires us to do today, doesn't make any economic sense if that local broadcaster only just rebroadcasts the same national signal, because there's no local. They don't have any local content, news, weather, sports. So it doesn't hurt them in any way.
No.
But it adds cost to the satellite provider.
But you're saying before we must carry mandate, we should stipulate some of the requirements that these stations have to participate in their local community.
That's correct. And I think that's a fair compromise.
I think that's a fair. Mr. Furry, what do you think of that comment?
I don't think that gets to the underlying constitutional problem here. The original rule was held up, again, to protect over-the-air viewers from losing some broadcast service. I don't think you can make that.
But he's saying home shopping
DBS.
network doesn't fit that requirement, what you're just saying.
No, it may fit that requirement, but I don't think you could make the case that absent carriage on a DBS system that these stations would fail. They're not being carried now, and they're not failing.
Okay.
So that the over-the-air viewers would not lose the service.
Anyone else like to comment as quickly? I have one more question, Mr. Chairman. Go ahead.
I've got a thought, sort of a grand bargain that
There we go.
that I think might work, and actually also may perhaps resolve some of the constitutional issues. One never knows what a court is going to do, so I can't guarantee it. So I think a local-into-local requirement is required if and only if you reform retransmission consent, because that's a monopoly problem for the broadcasters. You allow the importation of distant signals without restriction, and you have this unitary license. So I wouldn't be in favor of just imposing local into local on satellite providers without those other three reforms. And this way, the government is giving something to the DBS providers and asking in return, and that could resolve the constitutional problems.
Okay, let me go to my other question, Mr. Ergen and Mr. Cabrilli. there's been a delay in the DTV transition to, because of February 17th is no longer the date, and by June 12th we'll finally have reached the end of the analog full power broadcast. What do we need to be made in the television, satellite television law after the completion of this digital TV transition? Is it simple as plugging a digital standard into the FCC predictive model and testing regime for distant signal eligibility, or is there anything else that we need to do? Mr. Ergen?
Well, assuming you keep the 119 license and it doesn't go into like a unitary license, 122 as the Copyright Office has recommended, then you must go out, and the digital signal is much different than an analog signal. As we all know, there's a waterfall effect. The signal normally doesn't go as far, and you either get it perfectly or you don't get it at all, or it breaks up a lot on you. So I think there has to be a new model. The predictive model has always been subject to interpretation, court battles, and so forth. It seems there has to be a way in the digital realm. A customer knows whether he gets a signal or not. In the analog world, it was always subjective as to the picture quality, but in the digital world, the customer knows. And I think there has to be a much better model in the digital world if you're going to keep the 119 license.
Okay. Mr. Cabrelli?
I agree with Mr. Ergen. I mean, the basis for this was a prediction where the customer could not get an over-the-air signal. So as we go from analog to digital, we need to switch the model from an analog model to a digital model, because that's now the signal that the broadcasters are producing. It is a much more clear drop-off. There's less of this ambiguous, you get a signal so much % of the time, and it's, there is no snow and stuff like that. So we need to go to a digital model. It's a little gap in the way the law versus the digital transition has gone, and use that, because there will still be customers who do not get an over-the-air signal and need some other way of getting network services.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Stearns. The gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Stupak, is recognized for 7 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question's, of course, going to deal with local and the locals. So let me ask Mr. Gabrielli and Mr. Ergen, do you believe local and the local in all 210 markets is in the public interest and would promote localism? Mr. Gabrielli?
Oh, okay, I'll take this one first. If it's truly local content, it will certainly help. As Mr. Ergen said, is we both rebroadcast numerous stations locally that are equally available on a national basis.
Yeah, but do you believe it's in the public interest to do this?
We believe it's in the public interest, but again, I make my point is, both of us are secondary transmitters of a primary broadcast that the broadcasters are supposed to be putting out.
Sure. So, will you, Mr. Ergen? My time's limited, so I'm not going to let you filibuster.
Yes, I do believe it's in the public interest, and we would love to be able to do it if the right incentives and legal things were able for us to do it. And of course, obviously,
why do you need incentives? Why do you need incentives?
Well, because there's a huge cost to do that. So
what are the costs?
It costs about $1 million for each beam that you put.
So you got 32 more areas you said you have to cover. It's going to cost $32 million.
$32 million. It costs about $250,000 or more per year to receive the signal via fiber. So that's 32 times $250,000 per year. In a city, in one DMA like Glendive, Montana, there's 3,700 homes. If you got every single subscriber to Dish Network, you couldn't pay your cost to do it. And in our particular case,
so what kind of incentives are you looking for?
In our particular case, we do not have a statutory 119 license to be able to bring in the missing short market signals.
So what incentives are you looking for?
So we would look for a few things. One is some reform of the must-carry legislation so that we can free up bandwidth that helps us from an economic point of view. Second, we would look for some help with how do we get the signal back to our uplink sites. Perhaps we could even share that cost with DirecTV under antitrust exemption and so forth. The third thing we would look for is a license, compulsory license, so that we can bring in short market signals where a network affiliate is missing in the particular short market. So, for example, in the cities that we don't do today, we've done every market that is not a short market. So otherwise, and makes no sense to do a short market if we can't also deliver the other networks. And so we need reform there from a licensing point of view. And
our constituents aren't asking for all four of them. We just want local and the local. Like when my schools were closed yesterday, we want to know that. ABC isn't going to tell me that. Unless it's local media, right?
So give me the particular DMA. Which is your DMA?
Marquette.
Okay, so Marquette is missing which networks?
Well, we only have one.
No, you have one network. So for us to spend over $1 million and $250,000 a year in Marquette, where we only can bring in one network, our customer and we as a company are not able to bring in ABC, CBS, and Fox. That doesn't make economic sense to us. And every market where we as a company can bring in all four networks, we have done it. More than anybody else on this panel, we have done it. But we're in a situation where we do not have the ability to bring in all the networks.
Well, you mentioned
and
capacity.
The economics don't make sense.
Yeah, you mentioned capacity. Would you be willing to provide to the members? Would you be willing to provide us responses as to your capacity to reach all 210?
Yes, we would.
Okay, and you'll provide that to us, and we'll follow it up in writing?
Yes, we would. We would like to work with you, Congressman. We'd like to work with you.
Yes, we'll provide that to you.
Okay. Well, I'd like to work with you guys too, but the part that bothers me is like when DirecTV, when News Corp bought you out, if you look at the September 22nd, 2003 document, page 4, you said as early as 2006 and no later than 2008, all 210 DMAs would be covered. And I understand you're now owned by Liberty, but we keep getting these promises that we're going to have our local and the local, and we never get it. So we have no choice but to enter into a mandatory requirement. I actually have not just Marquette, but also Alpena, where my district is not being covered. And you can point to your Indiana example, but that's not the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. That might work in Indiana, but certainly not in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. So all these promises we get from you guys, it never seems to fulfill it. The same thing you said back in '99, give us 10 years because technology and the expense would come down, we'll do it. It's never been done.
Well, let me respond to that. So very respectively, I don't think it's a fair characterization. It was News Corp, not DirecTV, which no longer owns a part of DirecTV. That
it was News Corp buying DirecTV, right?
News Corp owned a percent of DirecTV.
Right.
But
and that was
News Corp, and it really wasn't a
that was your application to do it, right?
Yeah, the promise was for a seamless, integrated local solution in these markets, which we think with our integrated off-air tuner, which literally connects to our set-top boxes, it receives over-the-air signals, it puts them on the guide, you can control them just like you can control any other channel.
Sure.
Yeah,
but see, you promised to do it in 2003. Now you're telling me here in 2009 you can't do it for all these excuses.
No, we can do it. We have it.
So why didn't you do it then? You said you'd do it by the end of 2008.
By the end of 2008, last year, we had this product. We have a product that the consumer can get, plug it in with our box, put an outdoor antenna on it to receive over-the-air signals. It integrates the two. The customer has no idea that which ones come over the air versus which ones come from satellite.
Sure. Mr. Ergen, you want to say something on it?
Well, again, and this is my personal opinion. From a public perspective, what the gentleman from DirecTV says is correct, but from a public perspective, it doesn't really work. I think people want it via satellite because the picture quality is better, and you can always guarantee the customer the signal. I think from our perspective, what we need is the right, in Marquette, for example, to bring in the neighboring DMA channels, networks that aren't available in Marquette. So then you have a full complement of ABC, NBC, CBS, and Fox, one of those being Marquette. That would give us the economic incentive to go and do the 32 markets that we don't do today.
Well, if Dish is doing more than DirecTV, how come you're doing more than DirecTV then? Why aren't you both at 178 as opposed to?
Well, I can't speak for DirecTV, and I'll let Mr. Gabrielli do it. But we've made different choices. For example, Mr. Gabrielli has done more with PBS. He's done more.
So that takes care of Ms. Eshu's issue.
So he's made a choice to do some additional PBS high definition channels. We've taken that spectrum and said we can do more local markets because that's what the vast majority of our consumers have asked us to do. But what happens is it's difficult to do both. I think I've heard from the congressman that people would like all 210 markets. Everybody would like must carry, and people would like all HD, which takes 4 times the capacity of standard definition. And oh, by the way, I think from PBS, they wanted all the multicast channels, which could be another 8 or 10 sub-channels for every channel that you have. Yeah. The laws of physics won't allow us to do that from a satellite
Well, those of us in the rural areas just want to be treated same as those in the urban areas. Why should we be treated any less after repeated promises and we license it? So why do we? Yeah, I
agree. I tend to agree with you because grew up in rural America, and we started our business in rural America, so I have a real sympathy there. What happens is it becomes a zero-sum game. You'd like to have capacity for Marquette. Fair point. PBS would like to have capacity for high-definition PBS and 10 sub-channels, right? Other people would like to have capacity for must-carry channels, even though there's no local content. And what happens is we can't physically, the law of physics, do all that inside. We've made huge strides, and as Mr. Gabrielli pointed out, 80% of our capacity today is just for local.
Well, that's why I asked the question, and you said you'd provide that capacity issue, because we keep hearing that, but no one ever can directly point to what it is.
What I would suggest is,
so I'd
like to come work with your staff, and I would like to, I think I understand your issue, and I would like you to understand our capacity issues, and we'll certainly come open kimono and show everything. And I'd like to work with you to solve the problem that you're addressing, because I think it's a real problem.
We'll follow up with written questions as capacity, because I think it's important for all members of the committee to understand this capacity issue. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Stupak. The gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Shimkus, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I appreciate my colleague from Michigan's comments. I mean, he's an ardent fighter for rural America, and I appreciate that. But I just want to get a clarification, Mr. Ergen. In this debate, or discussion you had with Mr. Stupak, and I saw another panelist want to get the attention. Are you saying that if, since Marquette has one local station, and that's the market reason why it's difficult, but if you were allowed to broadcast the additional networks that may not now serve that area, that would make an economic argument for doing so? Did I hear that right?
That's correct.
Mr. Yagi, you were jumping out of your seat on that, and I just kind of want to know why.
I'm afraid I didn't totally understand the chairman's question when it came to me about short markets. That's a rather new term to me. Marquette, Michigan's a very interesting market. There are 4 affiliated stations in Marquette, Michigan. 2 of them are doing news. One is a satellite, full-fledged satellite of the CBS station out of Green Bay. And yes, I think that should be carried and should be part of the carriage. The Fox station there is in terrible economic shape. But if it were carried, I think it might improve its economic conditions. So I'm sorry I misunderstood the chairman when he talked about short markets. I wasn't quite aware of that's the way you were terming a market.
But you're agreeing with Mr. Ergen's statement on broadcasting the 4 networks.
Well, I'm surprised Mr. Ergen doesn't know that there are 4 network stations in Marquette. It's not a short market.
I don't want y'all getting fired. I'm just trying to get clarification here. We're all among friends here. What I have learned in the digital transition, not the satellite debate, is that there's going to be some communities that, because of the length of the analog signal, they're going to assume that that is their local station, where when we do a digital broadcast, the local affiliates are going to say, this is our market area, and this is how far we're going to service. And people are going to say, hey, I lost, where they have another region. I know before, when we started, the state of Indiana was up there on the placard of all the different DMAs, and 2 of those bleed into my congressional district. So we have this where Vincennes is the major market for southeastern Illinois, or Paducah is a major market, and that's where they get all their, or Cape Girardeau, Missouri, or Springfield, or the St. Louis one. I have 5 markets that cover my congressional district. Let me ask a question to all the panelists, and the time is short, so if you kind of keep in, this is not a gotcha one, this is just, I do some gotcha questions every now and then, but even apart from specific substantive changes to this legislation, could we improve things by simplifying the law? The current law is written. Is there things that we can simplify that makes it easier versus any major rewrite? And let's just go left to right. Mr. Ferry?
I'm not sure how to answer that question. Simpler is always better, but right now I don't have an obvious answer.
That's fine.
I advocate for one unitary license. There's no rationale, either technologically or for any other reason, to have satellite and cable under two different compulsory licenses. I think in the short term, a DMA fix allowing the importation of, signals from adjacent DMAs or in-state DMAs, that's pretty simple. That's not hard. And in the future, getting rid of distance signal protection altogether.
Thank you. Mr. Yeager.
My answer would be yes. Local and local would simplify it greatly.
Okay.
It's simple. From a public television standpoint, we would prefer to have carriage in all markets and want to have conditions that maximize our digital multicast carrying capacity. The SU bill would be a very useful way of making that happen.
Mr. Gabrielli.
Simple answer is yes, it would greatly help. Just if an example is those stations that actually bleed over into another market that doesn't have that network affiliate, it's not part of their DMA, but yet they have rights under us that we can't bring somebody else in. That'd be a very simple fix.
None of these other issues are simple, Congressman. The simplest, most straightforward thing for the committee to do is a straight reauthorization of the distance signal license.
Great, thank you. Mr. Ergen.
Well, the absolute signal is to treat television like newspapers, which means you can, in Washington, you can buy the New York Times, you can buy the Miami Herald, you can buy the Washington Post. Let customers buy any network signal they want to.
Okay, I would ask another one, Mr. Chairman. My time's expired, so I'll yield back.
Thank you very much, Mr. Shimkus. The gentlelady from Colorado, Ms. DeGette, is recognized for 7 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. There seems, I want to go to this issue of the local-to-local transmission, and there seems to be some agreement on the panel that, at least among Mr. Gabrielli and Mr. Ergen, that it's a good goal to try to carry these channels if they have local content. Mr. Gabrielli, I'd like to ask you, how many of the channels you're being asked to carry under the local-to-local do not have local content?
Offhand, I don't know. I know.
Can you give me a percentage? Is it a large percentage?
It's a significant percentage. I would say it's 30% of the channels are.
30% of the local channels have no local content.
That would just be a guess from doing
and
with.
Why is that? Is it channels that are being rebroadcast?
To a large majority, yes. The shopping channels that Mr. Ergen talked about. Certain religious channels are just strictly delivered by satellite to a facility and just rebroadcasted out to that local channel.
Mr. Ergen, would you agree with that percentage, 30%?
The channels that have no local content is between 15 and 20%.
15 and 20%, okay. And does that provide a real burden on you folks? Because I know you share the goal. If it's truly a local content, then you want to be able to rebroadcast that, right?
Well, I agree with Congressman Stubik that we'd be much better off to free up that 15 or 20% of channels that have no local content and go get Marquette and get them up on the satellite.
Right.
And some of these other locations, the other 32 markets that we don't do today.
So that's
to me, that's an economic trade-off where the local broadcaster suffers zero and the 32 markets that we don't do today get a great benefit, and then therefore the consumer gets a great benefit.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. And that kind of goes to the heart of the issue. How are you going to determine who determines whether there's local content?
My suggestion would be that probably the broadcasters submit to the FCC or so forth, and they determine that the cutoff that you're allocated is just as they define a network today. I believe the FCC could define a local content hurdle. That would.
Okay, so you think it should be up to the FCC?
I mean, I'd prefer that this committee do it, but I think that the actual expert on it would probably be the FCC.
The chairman in charge of determining that. I wanted to ask you, Mr. Rowland. I want you to ask you to comment on that, because it seems to me to make sense, on the one hand, to require transmission of shows truly with local content. But if you have these retransmitted shows that don't have any local content, that seems to be cluttering up the problem. What's your response to that?
Well, I think from a public television standpoint, there is a tremendous amount of local content in all of the licensees. The stations across the country are not just retransmitters of the PBS.
Well, I don't think that that's the problem that Mr. Gabrielli and Mr. Ergen are identifying, though, is the PBS. There's a different problem they see with that, which I'll get to in a minute. But what they're saying is there's a lot of other shows, shopping shows and other shows that have no local content that they're being asked to I mean, for example, with Colorado Public Broadcasting, if they were transmitting that, sure, they might have some of the national PBS shows, but there would also be substantial local content. So I think you'd be okay. What about these shows that are just being rebroadcast by local TV stations that really don't have any local content at all?
Yeah, that is a very difficult issue, and I don't have a real clear sense of the dimensions of that problem.
Well, as Mr. Ergen just said, it's 15 to 20%.
Yeah, I haven't seen the statistics on that, and I have to look at it much more closely.
What's the view of the public broadcast systems? I don't know if you're here representing them or just Colorado Public Broadcasting, but of that 15 to 20%, what would your view be if we could somehow find some standard to take that out? Wouldn't that free up space for you folks to get broadcast?
Yeah, it might.
Have you thought about that issue?
No, I haven't.
Okay. Now that might be worth doing. Now, what about this point that Mr. Gabrielli was making about it's not just public broadcast system, but it's also high definition, and then there's all of these substations. I didn't really understand that issue so much. Is that something that the public broadcasting system is shooting for? And
I think what has happened, of course, is that as digital has advanced, and it's always a moving target, it's dynamic, it's changing with compression technologies. We're no longer in a world of a single HD channel opportunity any longer. You can get more multicast capacity, and many of those are very, very valuable services. To think of them as sub-channels sometimes demeans them when in fact they are very, very important in the eyes of the viewers who use them. And I think that's what we're talking about, is broadening out the range of the multicast stream capacity.
Well, so that's a very interesting question then. And that question is how, as we broaden out the HD capacity of the local shows and the public broadcasting, how much of that should these folks be required to carry?
Well, I think ultimately the objective would be to have as much as we are otherwise putting out over our free over-the-air transmitters, in effect the full 19.4 megabits capacity that we have.
And Mr. Ergen, what's your view on that?
Well, you've asked a really good question there.
Thanks.
To today's technology, that 19.4 megabits could be 15 channels, and so I don't think it's realistic to pass legislation that would require cable and satellite and phone broadcaster companies to retransmit 10 or 12 or 15 PBS subchannels. We are supportive of the core PBS signal, and we do believe it does in almost every case have a lot of local content and needs the local fundraising. So we are very, very supportive of the national PBS, or the main PBS feed, but the multicast is not a requirement that anybody has burdened us with today, and we would be against that.
Mr. Rowland, what's your response to that? That you should really look at the number of channels, not the number of...
Yeah, and evaluate the services that are being provided. In Colorado, as you know, we've got 2 public television stations. Traditionally, in the analog world, they've been quite differentiated from one another. They have been value added in the public broadcasting firmament of television services. Between us now, we offer 6 multicast streams that are all differentiated from one another, ranging from Latino-oriented programming through to international news and public affairs, that together add up to a considerable service that's not otherwise available in the market. And so it seems reasonable to argue that those services should be made available.
You didn't exactly answer that, but I get the sense that frankly the public broadcasters and the companies share sort of some of the core values, and the question is, how do we make it work? So I will reiterate, at least for my own industries, what I did before, which is I would be happy to convene a meeting of you folks to talk about what we should do and if there's some kind of resolution. I had done that before, and that never came about, so I'll do it publicly right now.
We would relish that.
Thank you.
And just understand, we understand there are some capacity issues in the TDS world, and we're willing to work around that.
Great.
We have with DirecTV already.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. DeGette. The gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Deal, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There are issues here that some people want to talk about, some people don't. Mr. Franks, I was somewhat amazed when you made the pronouncement that the DMAs and the retransmission consent are not broken and we shouldn't tamper with it, and that a straight reauthorization is what this committee should be dealing with. I'm sure that was spoken with the same conviction that King George dismissed the taxation without representation of our early colonial revolutionaries. It is a statement of a monopolist. Now, I'm more inclined to agree with Ms. Soames' analysis here that retransmission is tied into it, and I know the chairman would prefer us not to get into that, but apparently your panelists didn't have that information, because almost all of them in some form or fashion have mentioned it, and I think ultimately it is one of those things we have to deal with. But let me talk about some of the other issues. Mr. Yeager, what percentage of the viewing population of your broadcasters receive their signal now over the air?
Well, it varies by market.
Well, average overall. Now, I'm told that the 2006 FCC study showed that it was about 15%.
That's probably a good average.
Do you expect that percentage to increase or decrease with the digital transition?
I'm hoping it decreases.
All right. So less and less people are going to get their signal from your broadcasters free of charge. They're going to have to go through some of these other mediums, cable, et cetera.
Well, no, the over-the-air signal will still be very, very strong, and I think it'll be superior in digital than it has been in analog.
But you said it was going to decrease in percentage of viewers.
Well, I think that's true, because right now the preferred delivery method for digital has been through cable and satellite. But as we get the converter boxes out, as we see more conversion to digital on the part of the home set, I think you'll see about the same kind of 15, 16%.
So you think it may go up then? I thought you just said a minute ago it would go down.
Well, what I'm really saying is I think it will go down because second sets are not included in anything we're doing.
Okay. Let me ask you, you like the DMA system, is that right? You like what DMAs give you in the terms of protection?
I believe in the DMA system as a way to designate a marketing area where there's a common kind of commonality of interest of the people that serve.
Well, that's all well and good, but over the air doesn't serve the needs of constituents in the DMAs. What are your broadcasters doing to increase or enhance the ability to reach those viewers without the necessity of going through some of the multi-channel providers?
I'm sorry, I'm not quite sure I understand the question.
There are places in my district, and I think everybody we've heard from, places in their district, they can't get your broadcaster's signal over the air. Now, in going to digital may or may not enhance that spread. In fact, I'm inclined to think it may decrease it rather than increase it. If you are not doing anything to enhance the ability to expand the over-the-air, why would you object to us looking at the issue of DMAs as to the problems they present?
Well, we think, first of all, that the local and the local will solve the problem of people not being able to get a signal.
All right. Well, let me ask you this.
Mr. Deal, may I interrupt? You may not hold my opinion in high regard, but I would like to express it.
Maybe you can enhance my opinion.
I'll try valiantly. Actually, we're spending hundreds of millions of dollars on the digital transition to try and perfect that signal. In many instances, we're still not on the designated channel that we'll be on. We're not at the tower height. So as soon as we do make those switches, we know for a fact that KCBS in Los Angeles is not going to as easily reach the full market as the KCBS analog. We're prepared to spend millions of dollars trying to enhance that signal, change the antenna height If need be, go to translators and repeaters so that we do, it's in our interest. We do better in over-the-air homes. We get higher ratings in over-the-air homes. So it's very much in our economic.
But you don't get the retransmission money.
Oh, you know what? I would happily go back to a 3-channel universe, no retransmission. That was a wonderful business, Congressman, and I'd go back.
All right, well, let me ask you this. I don't think we're going back to that.
Well,
but we may be going
I'd swear off retrans if we could go back to an over-the-air regime, purely over.
We may go to a consideration of allowing some of your CBS affiliates to cross the DMA boundaries.
They can do it today. I keep hearing this concern about local news. I grew up, well, the map's not. I grew up in that corner of Indiana, Michigan City. We were served by the Chicago market. My father commuted to Chicago, so we had an economic affinity with Chicago. But if there's a desire to bring South Bend news into Michigan City, that can be done today. It can be done this afternoon with no change to the law, no change to regulation.
So you're saying then the issue of joining DMAs or in-state DMAs crossing those lines is not an issue?
I think it's only an issue for people who are masquerading for either to evade retrans or to bring in competing network, a second source of network programming. But what I hear from this committee is that the desire is for news. If the desire is for news, that is controlled by the local station. They control the copyright. They can authorize it this afternoon.
I have to jump in there a little bit. I can't let Mr. Franks get away with that. He is talking just about news, and it's not practical. That means we'd be turning on and off that channel 6, 8, 10 times a day. It means when a senator runs his political commercial, you don't get it across state lines. And we always know people think about their weather and their news and their sports and everything else. So it just doesn't work from a practical point of view. And you know what Mr. Franks and the broadcasters are saying here is that we're not going to build the towers out. So you have to build your satellites and your cable systems and your plant equipment, right? And we want you to build the towers, and then we're going to charge you for our signal on top of that. And then in a satellite perspective, you got to pay the fiber costs to get the signal back to your uplink center, right? And we're just going to sit back in one little building and have a signal that we kind of send out to get to you. And I don't think the economics of that's quite fair. And I think you've pointed that out correctly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deal. The gentlelady from the Virgin Islands, Ms. Christensen, is recognized for 7 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I recognize that this is the first hearing of our newly constituted subcommittee. I want to applaud Chairman Waxman for creating it, and thank you, Chairman Boucher and Ranking Member Stearns, for holding this hearing. What for me, who is new to this depth of the communications world, are very complex issues as we prepare to reauthorize the Satellite Home Viewer Act. Hopefully by the end of this hearing, I will understand why I have to have one TV on satellite and another on cable so that I can get network as well as local stations and distant programming at home. And also why I have to try to find an excuse not to go home during baseball playoffs so I won't be bombarded by all of the complaints on why it's blacked out in the U.S. Virgin Islands. I have a lot to learn, but it's clear that the disparities remain between the satellite and cable providers, and also, importantly, in the ability of consumers based on where they live to have access to programs that they want to see. It's also clear that we're reauthorizing this act in a time of a changing landscape in terms of how broadcast programming is provided and the move to digital. So I want to thank my colleagues in the panel for this baptism by fire, but I'm learning. Mr. Franks, I'm still trying to get clear on all of the issues around DMA.
It's okay, so am I, Congressman.
Okay. But as I was reading last night, I guess Mr. Yeager also feels similarly to you, but I thought that you were the only one that didn't want to change the system, and I have a very simple question on that. Is that the position of all of the network stations, or is that just
I can only speak for CBS and the stations we own, Congresswoman. I can't speak for the other networks.
So, okay. Thank you. Ms. Sohn, do you think that being able to obtain regional sports programming is critical to competition in the multi-channel video programming distribution marketplace? Or put another way, is a consumer less likely to subscribe to services of a MVPD provider if the services don't include regional sports programming. There isn't any substitute for that, is there, or is this a situation that's harmful to consumers?
Well, absolutely. I mean, I'm a huge sports fan, so I can safely say that, you know, when viewers can't see their local sports teams, they are harmed, and it might make them less inclined to buy service from an MVPD. So absolutely. Unfortunately, the one entity that's missing from this panel are the sports leagues themselves, because they have an awful lot of power to say, you know, yes or no to an MVPD carrying their programming. And it is a shame that we don't have anybody from the NFL or Major League Baseball here to talk about that.
Yes, then I could ask them my question about the Virgin Islands, too. Thank you. Thank you. Who's from cable? We have a cable witness? Okay. Well, to Mr. Gabrielli and Mr. Ergen, one of the problems that occurred in the past with satellite operators was around the issue of the underserved homes and how program was or was not provided to them. You've had satellite TV has advocated adopting a policy whereby satellite operators would be permitted to offer distant, high-definition digital signals to consumers who currently only have access to local over-the-air SD signals. Given our past history with the satellite television industry that I referred to, what is to stop the industry from trying to, I don't know what word to use, poach or just get around this and with local broadcast station subscribers?
Okay. I think, again, the reason for a distant network signal is to deliver to a customer a service that he can't get locally. We carry a lot of markets in HD as Dish Network does, and in those markets, if we offer HD locally, they get HD locally. We don't offer distance. In places where either we don't carry it or a station is not yet HD and a customer wants HD, excuse me, we feel the right we should offer them HD. And we had agreements way before we started offering HD locally that we turned on a number of networks for customers because we were the only national carrier. As those markets became local HD markets, we've turned off those customers. The number of distant network service subscribers has decreased, not because of them reaching an over-the-air broadcast, but because we carry both the SD and the HD versions. And as we do that, we'll turn off the distant networks.
Okay. Ms. Sohn or anyone else who might want to answer this, I'm informed that the Communication Act permits cable companies to refuse to permit access to certain programming if it's provided terrestrially, the so-called terrestrial loophole. It seems that the FCC thinks the current law prevents it from taking action on this. Is the Commission right, or do you think, would you recommend a fix as we reauthorize this act?
Well, I would love to see Congress close the terrestrial loophole. There is an ambiguity as to whether an MVPD can avoid the program access rules by sending programming terrestrially as opposed to via satellite. Because the 1992 Cable Act says that if a vertically integrated cable operator sending programming via satellite does not make that programming available on reasonable and non-discriminatory terms, then somebody can file a program access complaint at the FCC. But because at the time the Cable Act was passed, the programming wasn't sent terrestrially, it was sent via satellite, so therefore Congress used those words, I think, not recognizing that the technology would change, which is, of course, a good warning to Congress when they do pass laws to try to be as technologically neutral as possible. So that's a long-winded answer to your question to say that I do think that Congress should make it clear that however a vertically integrated cable operator provides programming, it should be subject to the program access rules.
Well, I don't know if anyone had another comment. I got about 5 seconds.
Well, I guess we just agree the same thing. It's only a couple cases where there's loopholes being used, and it's specifically being used to keep both the Dish Network and us from carrying that content. There's really no reason for it anymore.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Ms. Christensen. The gentlelady from Tennessee, Ms. Blackburn, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I just have a couple of questions. Mr. Faree, I want to come first to you. In your testimony, you had specifically said that you believe consumers should be permitted to access whatever programming they desire so long as distributors and right holders can negotiate an agreement in the free market. Love, and you can send this to me in writing, because what I'd like is for you to elaborate on how you think we could best approach and realize that result, and what recommendations that you may have for improving that DMA system and that would spark an expansion of the DBS provided local programming. Many of us have talked about rural areas. I specifically mentioned Hardin and Hardeman counties in my district and the problem that we have there with accessing the program, and that being, again, a security issue. So I'd love to hear an expansion or an elaboration on those comments from you, if you will, and very briefly, if you want to add 1 or 2 points right now.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to do it in writing later when I've had more of a chance to reflect on the question. It's the problem with this area, as several of the members have mentioned, is that it is an incredibly complex web of rights and consumer expectations, and there is no simple way to untangle this web and just say, okay, here, I wish there were an ideal, simple free market answer. Here's how everybody would trade and deal. I think
Ms. Son has an idea or two on that.
And I respect, we're very close on most of these issues. I tend to disagree that it's as easy as unifying the licensing standards between all MVPDs, because one law for the lion and ox is oppression. They're not all similarly situated to begin with, and again, I think there'd be tremendous practical difficulties in trying to just come up with a simple, unified, compulsory a license. So I will endeavor to come up with something, but I don't have it for you right now off the cuff.
Thank you. I appreciate that, and I'll look forward to your response. Mr. Yeager, I want to come to you, if I may, please, sir. Thank you for your testimony. I know you favor that DMA system, and I wonder if you'd favor it in a digital world. But the question I really want to ask you goes to what I think is one of the Act's bedrock principles, which is Section 122 of the Copyright Act, which gives you a compulsory license for satellite carriers to retransmit your programming in a local market, and it allows all of you broadcasters to maintain control over that programming, to protect those advertising revenues, and then to ensure appropriate compensation to you for that signal and its content. And that makes sense to me, and I agree with that, because I think that it is an appropriate intellectual property protection. And using that same logic, what I want to ask you is this: do you or do you not believe that creators of musical works deserve that same protection when the terrestrial radio stations broadcast creative content over the air? And if not, why you would not agree extending that? And I'd also ask you, sir, if you do not think this is a mirror image argument, and why do you think that the cable, satellite, and telephone subscription video providers provide similar royalty compensation while the radio broadcasters do not?
And that's an excellent question, Congresswoman. Unfortunately, my side of the aisle at the National Association of Broadcasters is television. The side of the aisle you're talking about there is radio, and I understand that radio does have a hearing coming up in front of maybe this committee or the judiciary.
Do you not think that they're the same argument, sir?
No, I don't. I think they're quite different arguments.
So you think they're very different intellectual properties?
I don't really profess to be an expert on
Congresswoman,
Mr. Franks.
If I can speak on behalf of CBS Radio and CBS Television, with all due respect, I think you're making an apples and oranges comparison. On the television side of things, we spend a great deal of money procuring our programming, procuring that content from which we then seek compensation. In our radio businesses, in the TV business, we then have an exclusive right to that programming. in our radio, at our radio stations, the same record is played on 7 or 8 different stations, and it is aggressively pushed by the record companies and by the artists to the stations, asking us, please, please, to play this station, play the music. 5 weeks from now, we will broadcast proudly the Academy of Country Music Awards.
Okay.
Every one of those winners is going to stand up and say thank you to country radio for making their music known.
Thank you.
Okay, so here's the question. I think here's a better question. You asked great questions, Ms. Blackburn, but here's a better question. Why does satellite radio pay public performance royalties to the artists in the recording industry? Why do webcasters, a lot of who are going out of business, pay those royalties, but over-the-air broadcasting does not? That's the comparison that makes absolutely no sense, because those satellite radio and webcasting promote the heck out of music just the same as broadcasters do, and if those two have to pay, in my opinion, broadcasters should pay as well.
Thank you, ma'am. Yield back.
Thank you very much, Ms. Blackburn. The gentleman from Louisiana, Mr. Melanson, is recognized for 7 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it. Most of my questions are going to probably deal, Mr. Ergen and Mr. Gabrielli. I have a distinct issue that raises its head around the end of May and kind of hangs around till November of each year. It's called hurricane season. And because of that and the alignment of my district along the coast, I kind of live in what I call a black zone. They know we're out there because they want to get TV and such to us, but they don't want to cover our news very much. I've got a low-power station, which I understand creates a dilemma from a standpoint of getting broadcast vis-a-vis satellite. Prior to the storm, this station, low power, has been on local cable. When the storm came, 6 weeks, he's got a drag line out there with his tower with a signal, sending a signal off the top of a drag line. At least he had been for several months until he could get a new tower built. In the meantime, satellite people came in and started advertising throughout the community. Doesn't matter when the power goes down. If you got a generator, you can get TV coverage. The only problem is you couldn't get this low-power station. If he went to the tuner, then, in fact, the tuner is, if my understanding is correct, only gives him several-mile radius because it's local reception through the satellite. Is that a correct statement?
There you go. His territory is depicted or controlled by his power.
Yeah.
So the tuner can pick it up if he's got the power to the tuner.
Okay. On cable, he was carrying approximately several 100,000 people were receiving on the cable network that he has been carried on. When the storms hit, the satellite companies said, we can get you all your stations, but in fact couldn't provide him. My dilemma is I've got this black area that's in between Lafayette, Louisiana, New Orleans, Louisiana, and Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and none of them reported what was going on down there on a daily basis, which people who had evacuated want to know when they can come back, how they can get back, what the circumstances were. So, and let me just tell you, Mr. Gabrielli, your people, we've been working with them, talking to them, trying to figure out if there's somewhere else, and Mr. Ergen, your people too, to see if there's some help. Is there something that can be done in this reauthorization that provides for a station that provides more public service and 100% local content to the community in which I am, that New Orleans doesn't help them, Baton Rouge doesn't help them, other than for network coverage stuff, and Lafayette doesn't even get there. Is there anything that we can do in this bill that allows for me to help this? It's a business to this guy, but it is an information source to several 100,000 people that I can inject into this bill that would allow us to get him onto satellite or to some mechanism where those people will be able to get the information, particularly after disasters or hurricanes have been through.
And you bring up a really good point, and as I've said in my testimony in answer to a previous question, I think the best thing you could do is relax the must-carry obligation on cable and satellite broadcasters and eliminate any kind of must-carry requirement where there is not local content by the local broadcaster. In your situation, it's just the opposite. Your local broadcaster provides 100% local broadcasting and can't get carriage. He's being bumped off the satellite by somebody who doesn't have any local carriage at all because they're a bigger company or part of a big conglomerate or whatever. And the way the law is situated today, it doesn't make doesn't recognize the value of the local broadcaster that you have in your situation. So that's what I would recommend.
And yeah, the limiting resource for both of our companies is really the satellite capacity.
Right.
It takes 3 years to build and launch a satellite, $250 million, and they're up there for a long time. It's not like you can launch them every couple of years to update the capacity. So that is our limiting resource. In this case, Mr. Ergen's probably right. There's a full power shopping channel in New Orleans that we have to carry, and we no longer have the capacity to carry a truly local station like yours. So not having that must carry for those non-local stations like that frees up the capacity where we now can pick up these truly local stations that fit within existing spot beam capacity.
Now, is that your prerogative on the must carry, or can you take the option, QVC?
No, there's no option. If that full power QVC station New Orleans says, carry me, we have to carry it.
The local tuner, as I appreciate it, is just like a local adapter with rabbit ears, if you would. I have a duck camp 15 miles from this place. I can get the station. I live 30 miles away. I can't get the station. And of course, 30 to 50 miles is where all the people have moved away after the hurricane. Is there some other technology that's out there that vis-a-vis the dish networks, the direct TV network, satellite actually, that might be able to give them more distance, this particular station?
The two options are, with us, an integrated tuner that receives an over-the-air broadcast. If he can add a repeater or translator to reach farther, our systems will pick it up. The only other option is to be on the satellite, and we need to find the capacity to do that.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Balanson. The gentleman from Oregon, Mr. Walden, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. To our satellite providers, I'm just curious again, as I mentioned in my opening comments, Bend, Oregon. That's B-E-N-D, Oregon. Does not have the local into local yet on your services. And I'm curious two things. One, if you have a timeline, and I don't imagine you have every market memorized as to where you stand, but to do local into local, it's the second biggest community in my district, but it's also a rural district, so there are a lot of people use your services, and I'm just curious if you have a timeline there. And second, on that similar point, I understand that you will go or assist in terms of putting up an antenna for people to receive the local signal, and then it comes seamlessly through, in effect, the tuner. And I'm curious how you market that, what kind of awareness there is in terms of your marketing strategies for that service. So I don't think people are fully aware of how that works.
When a customer calls us, we know by his phone number approximately where he lives. And in those markets we don't offer a local solution, we do tell them we have another off-air solution that's integrated with it. I'm very familiar with Ben. I'm an Oregon State grad, so I know where Ben is.
You seem to have turned out okay despite that.
He must be
as a
Eugene
U of O grad.
Yeah. There's a
Duck Beaver rivalry.
Yeah, there's a station in Eugene. A guy calls me probably every other month and asks the same question. And with Ben, it's an interesting market, and because when it first started, there was, I think, one local station. And then when the stations or other stations went to digital, now it says, well, instead of now just being a Fox there on my digital secondary channels, I'm going to be an NBC and a CBS. And so now I have rights for, instead of being one station, I'd have to worry about one seat in the bus. Now I have to worry about more seats. So that really kind of complicated the situation of, it was where we're for years thinking of, okay, we'll find this one seat available for Bend. Oops, now it's 3 seats.
Now it's 3.
So
delay has its cost, Mr. Ergen.
Yeah, thank you. We recognize that Bend now has all, even though they're subcarriers, all 4 networks, and so we have under construction a satellite that will allow local to local in Bend, Oregon in January of next year. So as we sit here next year, a year from now, when I see you with our kids at college and
Wake,
at Wake, then we'll hopefully be celebrating the launch of Bend.
That's terrific. I'll be happy to help flip a switch. Mr. Yeager, and I appreciate that, and there's good example, role model to your left. Mr. Yeager, talk to me about DTV in the remaining 2 minutes I have. Medford market shifted, except one station. Tri-Cities, Washington, which also serves my district, shifted. We didn't get a single phone call. Do you know, did any of your stations?
None of ours shifted. We did apply for a couple of shifts. Were turned down by the FCC.
Really?
That for whatever reason, they didn't want all the stations in a market, in one of our markets, Quincy, Illinois, which is not far from Congressman Shimka's district. One station did go, we did not.
I understood that the FCC had decided on that policy. Mr. Chairman, I'd be curious. I don't know if you're planning a hearing on this DTV, a post-February 17th.
Will the gentleman yield?
Yes.
Thank you for yielding. We do indeed intend to have an oversight hearing on the DTV transition. We will probably wait until such point in time as the new money in the stimulus bill has made its way into the system, and the converter box program, the coupon program, has been re-energized with those new funds. So it will not be the most immediate thing that we do, but certainly in the spring of this year, well before the June 12 transition date, we will have an oversight hearing on that, and I thank the gentleman for yielding.
Well, and I'm glad we're going to do the hearing. I would actually argue just the opposite, and maybe it's because I'm now syncing with our new president who wants us to, reduce spending where we can, that maybe if this transition worked okay in the markets where it's occurred, we wouldn't need to spend all that money, and this would be a great place and time to save a little. One other comment, and Mr. Yeager, maybe you can address this. Fairness doctrine. Congressman Pence and I succeeded in getting an amendment in to prevent the FCC from using its funds to promulgate some version of the fairness doctrine. I understand in the omnibus bill that we're about to vote on that restriction's been stripped out. And so now the FCC, if this is the case, could use their funds to promulgate fairness doctrine, or it won't come up under those terms. It'll be called something else if they do it. Is that a concern you have, and do you think it should apply to cable and satellite if it does come back?
Well, it's a major concern to me, and I hope it doesn't come back, and if it doesn't apply to us, then it certainly shouldn't apply to cable or satellite.
Gentlemen from our satellite distributors, what's your view on fairness doctrine? You agree?
I agree with Mr. Yeager.
Thank you.
I also agree.
Thank you. Anybody else want to comment, even though I've overshot my time?
I spent a lot of my first part of my career defending the fairness doctrine. I think it's a doctrine whose time has come and passed, long past. But that doesn't mean that the whole public trustee doctrine shouldn't be reviewed to see whether broadcasters aren't getting a few too many government bennies.
Really?
Yeah, including free spectrum in exchange for not the best local program.
What if you got your spectrum allocation in an auction? Is that free?
They don't. They didn't get their
in the radio business, you do. Often.
What's that?
In the radio business.
Broadcasters get their spectrum for free. They don't.
No. In the radio, where you have competing applications in a market, you go to auction.
Okay.
And the highest bidder.
A license.
Right. So I bought it.
I just think the entire public trustee doctrine needs to be looked at again.
Well, we're getting a little bit far afield.
Far afield.
I'm just trying to give you new ideas.
I think the fairness doctrine is far afield, but whatever.
Mr. Walden certainly gets the award for covering the largest number of issues during the course of 5 minutes in this hearing today. Thank you, Mr. Walden. The gentleman from California, is that Mr. Booyer is here? Yes. The gentleman from Indiana, Mr. Booyer, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. First of all, since we're going to bring up other issues, while we're investigating this particular one, a couple of things of note. In Indiana last fall, it appeared that Lynn Broadcasting sort of went first out there in the marketplace in the retransmission negotiations with cable, i.e. Comcast, of which Lynn Broadcasting and their local went dark in Indianapolis. not a good thing, okay? So when we talk about free market principles in a market that really is also highly regulated, this is really hard. And I don't believe that was a good in the public interest for a station to go dark. It was one of these things where who's going to blink first? And I just want you to know that was not a good thing. It was not healthy. So we I guess, like to use terms about serving the public interests. That didn't do it at all. That's a CBS affiliate. So I got that sort of, and I kind of hold that thought because I recognize there are many retransmission agreements that are coming online. So I don't know if that was sort of posture about what's to occur. And then I noticed that, Mr. Franks, I don't want to pick on you, but I had noticed in December that your CEO of CBS had made some comments about how the model of the network broadcast, it's changing, and we have to change with the landscape. And he talked about that perhaps even in the future that the network will move toward cable, and that with regard to all these affiliate agreements that also they're going to be coming up for renewal here relatively soon, that you're going to cut the affiliates out of the retransmission money to go directly with cable and then cut out the local broadcasters. Now, for a lot of members of Congress of whom have close relationships with their localities, I have a strong curiosity here of what are those interests. So we can talk about all the spirit of this hearing today about trying to get the local programming while there are some big issues out there in front of us. So I almost got a sense that I don't want to get lost in the high weeds. So I'm going to do my opening and ask you, Mr. Franks, if you could sort of explain what your boss meant.
Well, first, Congressman, he was asked a hypothetical question, and
That's
he gave a
dangerous. Go ahead.
I'd be happy to give you send to you the full context of the question and the answer, because it has been reported in a number of places as if it was something that was being contemplated in the very near term. And I think his answer made clear that this is something that may happen over the course of 10 or 15 years. I mean, local broadcasting, we own a number of stations, so they are amongst the most valuable assets of the corporation. So the notion that we are going to abandon anytime soon local broadcasting is, I think, counterintuitive. So he was responding to a hypothetical, and in fact, we continue to support our affiliates. There are any number of legislative arenas, maybe even this one, where we could take a more selfish course than we do. We do not do that because we believe in the system. We believe in our local affiliates. Our network is a $4.5 billion business that we are not going to walk away from quickly.
And would this article have been accurate that you want a percentage of the retransmission fees from the local broadcaster?
Other networks have talked about that. I mean, a large part of what drives the retransmission consent value is the national programming. And in order to compete for the NFL, in order to compete for March Madness, we spend billions of dollars. And we may need help from our affiliates. We may need a share of their retransmission consent money in order to remain competitive for those rights.
Okay.
But,
so they're out. They're out there.
Just lost.
They're out there in tough negotiations. I mean, look, take the Indianapolis for example, where Lynn and Comcast went dark. That was one of your affiliates. Pardon?
It was Time Warner, not Comcast.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And 2 months later, we reached an agreement with Comcast, with Time Warner. And I mean, the Lynn situation was unfortunate for the network. It hurt the network's ratings. So we were monitoring it very closely, but we also respected Lynn's right. It is their right. We didn't Bigfoot them. We didn't cut them off. They are the licensee, and under the law, they have the retransmission consent right. What deal we then negotiate with them in an affiliation agreement is a matter between us and Lynn.
All right. I know my time is exhausted. May I ask?
I'll come back.
Mr. Chairman, may I ask one more? I know
Go ahead,
my
Mr.
time is exhausted. I want to, now let me throw back into this free market. I'm well aware that the CBS affiliate, through Lynn Broadcasting, which is the Lafayette, finally, after many years, had learned that there really were no legal ramifications as to why an affiliate in Illinois could sort of block that signal. And I appreciate, Mr. Gabrielli, for you to finally get this negotiated and online. But as a curiosity, if we're going to say, okay, really don't do the Stupak bill, let the marketplace work, but why then, Mr. Ergen, wouldn't you then get on board and do the very same thing that DirecTV is doing in Lafayette? This is almost 150,000 households. So don't give me the 1,400 household answer.
Yeah, it's a unique problem to Dish Network. We don't have a compulsory license to bring in. I think in Lafayette there's a CBS affiliate, but there's not an ABC, NBC, or CBS, so it's what we call a short market. Mm-hmm. We don't have a license to bring in those networks. So just to have one station and go to the expense for one station without the ability to bring in the other markets. DirecTV does have a license; they can bring in the other one. So that's why we haven't done it.
So that's a money answer.
No, it's a regulatory. It's an issue where we, after a long court battle, we don't have a license to do it. So if that doesn't get, if we had a license to do it, then the economics would make sense for us.
Can we let Mr. Franks answer, and then I'm done?
It's a little off point, so you may be sorry that you let me back in. But in the context of all the talk about DMA reform, I understand the problem of the short markets. I truly do. I understand Lafayette. I am from Michigan City. But why it is then preferable to bring in our station from New York to Lafayette, as opposed to figuring out a way to bring the Indianapolis stations into Lafayette, when here we're talking about we need more help on getting in-state signals to, and then you're going to bring in New York City. I understand the attractiveness of providing the network programming, but it sure isn't localism.
On that note, thank you, Mr. Booyer. Thank you, members of the panel, for what has been a very constructive and informative conversation. We will be having further discussions with each of you, I'm sure, as we construct the legislation. And members of this panel will perhaps be sending some additional questions to you. In fact, with Mr. Stearns' consent, I will ask unanimous consent that all members of the subcommittee have the opportunity to propound in writing questions to the witnesses for a period of, shall we say, 10 days. So without objection, and you probably will be getting questions from a number of our witnesses. So your responses today have been very helpful to us. This has been a truly constructive discussion, and when you get questions sent by members of the panel, please return the answers as quickly as you can. With the thanks of the chair to all participants, this hearing is adjourned.
Good job.